So I'll start by asking you to imagine the following problem. You are about to pay the bill at a restaurant in a country you've never visited before, and you have no idea how much you're supposed to tip, or if you're even supposed to tip. What would you do in this situation? If you're anything like me, you're probably not going to ask other customers. Instead, being very tech-savvy, you'll reach out to your phone, message a friend, ask Google, or navigate to a tipping app if you have one, and then your problem is solved. And this is very much the culture these days. If you have a problem, whether it makes sense or not, there's an app for it, or 3, or 1,000,000. Now, my work has always been about using technology to solve problems, but it's not the kind of technology you interact directly with. And instead, it's much more embedded and non-intrusive to the point that you may not even know it's there. For an example, the I Am Blankie is a beautiful piece of embroidered fabric that could detect sleep apnea. That's because there is a network of sensors and controllers meshed within the design to do that. And you don't know, probably. Another example is Internet of Moss. There's a carpet of sensors that could gauge and possibly control the levels of water, humidity, and nutrients without you knowing or intervening. But tonight, I want to focus on a very different problem, but the solution could be solved, or at least somewhat addressed, with non-intrusive technology. Who here has not heard about forced displacement? This is when people have to flee their homes because of war or disaster, and they can't go back. Most of you, or at least a few of you, must have heard of this number, 65 million people. That's the number of displaced persons globally. It's huge and it's increasing. Now, a number that most of you have never heard of is 17. The average displacement period is 17 years. And because of that, many camps are being increasingly considered as the cities of tomorrow. Now, in architecture school, so I have a degree in architecture and a degree in computer science, and now I'm in information science. In architecture school, they taught me that if you want to have a city, you need architects and urban planners. Speaking of architects, let me throw one more number at you. 3%. Architects contribute to only 3% of the built environment, and camps are typically not part of that 3%. It's not because architects don't want to help. There are so many architects out there who want to help, but the way forced displacement works, there's very little room for architects to get involved. That does not mean there's no construction happening in camps. A year ago, I had the privilege of visiting a few camps in Iraq. Be it canvas, metal, glass, wood, tarp, or even concrete and cement. Camp occupants are building and customizing their own shelters, piece by piece by piece, over the course of months or years without architects. The problem is that none of these will withstand or survive for 5 years, let alone 17. Even the pretty concrete house, it doesn't have a proper foundation, and it's not structurally or ecologically sound. And recently, the region has been hit by 2 earthquakes. One other thing that I want you to consider, if a child is born in camp, they may not leave until they're adults. Remember that 17 number? Or they may not leave at all. So camp becomes their home. It's their city, but they don't have a proper home in that camp, in that city. And so my goal is to help people who suddenly find themselves in a situation where they've lost their home, they have no construction experience, like most people here, and they can't hire architects, but they need proper shelter, because a proper shelter is the backbone for having a healthy and humane life. One solution we considered is to give camp occupants a menu of a few designs that they can choose from, and a manual, like an IKEA manual, to build the design that they choose. The problem with this approach is streamlining. For example, some families in camps build typical monolithic concrete structures. Others might choose to merge their plots with relatives, and they designate maybe a couple of rooms for sleeping and living activities, because then they can have a large yard for the kids and a store to generate income, while others have the space to spare and they might have an outdoor terrace. These are just 3 out of hundreds of examples, and they're all Syrian refugees who've come from the same region, have the same customs and the same assigned plot, but each family is different. So one or a few modules are not going to address their diverse needs. So our first step towards a solution is a kit that has instructions, examples, templates, stencils, a questionnaire that help galvanize the inner architect in the user, along with a sketching sheet where users can draw their dream home. Now, you might notice that this is happening on paper. It's that ancient medium that some of you may not even use anymore. And that's intentional. We have a rule. Do not use technology unless it's necessary, and do not use it unless it's off camp. And that's because we're dealing with scarcity. This is where actually many colleagues in the field look at me as though I've broke some code of honor. Why are you not doing this as an app? Well, this brings me back to my first example about the tipping app. In our context, it's appropriate. But do any of us have to line up for hours to get a gas ration that will not last us until the next scheduled ration? No. So how can we apply the same problem-solving mindset? We can't, and we shouldn't. Now, once the sketching process is over, the sketches are either mailed to us or an NGO scans them somewhere off camp. And then I trace them manually in a digital modeling software. This process is intentionally manual, but performed within a digital realm, because it's hard to have an algorithm that can detect some of the design errors. Yes, there are design errors, and I have to go in and find them and fix them. But it's actually very efficient. To give you an example, the user on the left drew the dining room exactly the size of the dining table. The user on the right sketched something that looks more of a mental map than an actual house. And that's okay. They're not architects. So I go in, apply my sense and expertise, and improve their design. Sometimes I do more than one version because I don't want the user to be disappointed. So in this case, the human is driving the technology, and it's efficient. I can do it in 10 minutes, and it's robust. Step 3 is where technology finally takes the driver's seat. So once I have the tracing done, it's fed to an algorithm, and the algorithm does more error checking and correction, as well as extruding the 3D geometry. And this does not require creativity. And if I were to do it myself, it would take me hours, and it's so boring. So here, an algorithm is very appropriate. Now, in the last step, to make sure that this initial part of the solution, which is design, is working, we deliver back to the user instructions on paper and ask them to build what they designed with Play-Doh at 1:50 scale. I've done this a lot over the past 2 years, and I'm absolutely blown away by the diversity of designs. It's something we already expected, but something that we did not expect is also how different people are in their perception of geometry. So if you look at the 6 examples here, all of them have domes, but the domes are very different. And I didn't know that. And this emphasizes even further the individuality of the users, and we have to accommodate for that. Another thing that really surprised me was how fun and engaging the process seems to be. I've done this with tens of users. Some of them are very tech savvy. Some of them are very vocal with their criticism. You know, someone told me, "Miss, I don't like the way your instructions work. I'm going to do my own thing." I'm like, "Sure, do what you like." But none of them complained. Why is this happening on paper? Why is this not an app? And you know what? This is the typical aftermath of a sketching session. Can you replicate this on a small mobile screen? You can't. The collaboration, the spreading of the paper, the critiquing, this medium works for the intended context and for the intended purpose. Another really cool thing that is coming out of this is that there is an inner architect inside each and every one of us. And that's because we experience space. Space stays in our memory. We have dreams of what kind of space we want. So to give you an example, this is a design by a 13-year-old Syrian refugee. His dream house is actually a bricolage of all kinds of things. So at the top, the two domes are a kitchen and a bathroom. And he designed them such that they're attached to the garage. And that's because in camps, some NGOs build kitchens and bathrooms, and they build them separated next to the tent or the caravan. So in his mind, he designed them as an outhouse. On the right, you see that the structure is symmetrical and it has many rooms. That's because he envisions sharing this space with his grandparents, his uncle, and his family, because that is the kind of living arrangements they had in Syria. But he also has a unique dream feature, and that is each bedroom has its own washroom, and each washroom has a large window. That is his dream house. Now maybe you want to think about your dream house. What I think made this process work for all kind of different ages and demographic groups, because I've also done this in Canada, is the playfulness of the interface. It's not serious. It's paper, it's stickers. Even adults love using stickers. If you make a mistake, you can just erase it. There is no frustrating technology to learn or fiddle with, and I even had illiterate users engage in it. It works. But of equal importance is the role of technology. So what helped also kind of trigger this or nurture user creativity, knowing that technology has got their back. It's okay if they made mistakes, because these mistakes will be caught and corrected, and that further helped unleash their creativity. So this user, he was paranoid about doing this. He kept saying, "I have zero artistic ability, I don't want to do this." And I think you can agree that his sketch is maybe geometrically challenged. But once it was processed, you see that there's a form of design philosophy. There is symmetry, there are all these modules plugging into a central space, there's a hierarchy of spaces, and technology helped elevate his ideas without hijacking them. Now I'm going to wrap up with this. Designers sometimes tend to impose their own value sets, and these value sets sometimes stem from backgrounds of privilege and Western centricism. But that cannot work if we're trying to use our expertise to help people in all kinds of different contexts. This is why we had to go and understand the context. We understand that there is tension between user creativity and technology. There is also the need for expert intervention, and we had to shuffle them around. And the solution, as you saw, is not a simple app. It's actually very complicated. It has all these stages, and in some stages, technology is completely removed. In other stages, technology is in the foreground. But that curation is necessary. And as we move forward with this project, hopefully going from the sketching phase all the way to a full shelter, we have to maintain that careful curation of technology. If we are genuine and committed to helping those who lose their home in their difficult but inspiring self-help journey. Thank you very much.